I'm going to tell you what I consider a very sad story. And hopefully this time I won't cry. Sometimes I cry when I tell the story of Andy and the wad of paper. Andy was a very, very bright, and again, intelligence is a hypothetical construct, but this guy, he probably would have scored really high on an intelligence test, and he would have had high SATs and 4.0 average and all that stuff. This guy had a lot of good social skills, a lot of positive things going for him. But Andy, when he was about 13 or so, his father left his mother, and it was a very nasty, nasty situation, which I'm not going to get into. But they had a very ugly divorce. The father was a very wealthy man and left the wife for a younger woman kind of thing. And then he moved to another state to move in with that woman and sort of abandoned Andy. And Andy adored his dad, and Andy, the dad was revolved around his dad. He just worshipped his dad. So it really broke him when this happened. So he started getting in trouble. He started hanging out with the wrong kids and doing drugs and got into some other kind of trouble. And since the family had means and the dad was able to make sure that he went to a good facility where he could be rehabilitated and treated for his behavior problems. And he sent him to a behavioral facility that was like $450 a day, kind of fancy country club-like place, very expensive. And this was more than 20 years ago, so these days that would be over $1,000 a day probably, the way inflation has gone. So Andy winds up at this facility, and Andy comes in, and Andy, some psychologist or some consultant had done a point system and level system for this residential facility, a one-size-fits-all kind of program, and for all the kids, they had the same target behaviors. Everybody that came in had the same target behaviors. It wasn't individualized. And then they had a standard set of response definitions for all those target behaviors. So physical aggression against others, there was a standard response definition for physical aggression against others. And everything, disrespect to staff and all kinds of stuff. And the staff supposedly collected data, and they didn't graph the data, but at least they were supposed to collect data. But then they had this level system, and a kid went up the levels depending on their behaviors, and it was mostly absence of bad behavior that got them up the levels. And supposedly they had it tied, so when they got to the highest level, then they were ready to start looking at discharge, and they started doing discharge planning, and then they hope to discharge you as soon as possible after you reach that level. And you know, later on in course number 3, 5002, we'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages of that type of one-size-fits-all programs, mostly disadvantages. But right now, that's not the point of this story. The, the point of the story is that Andy came in and he learned the level system really well, so that from what I could tell, by the time I came in to consult on the case, he knew that manual for the level system better than any of the staff. He knew it backwards and forwards. But Andy had gone through the level system quickly, and it did always take time because you had to be good for a long time before you moved to the next level. But he had made it up the levels one at a time, never going back. So he had been there for about a year, and he made it to the highest level, and he was going to go on discharge. Now, Andy was kind of like the perfect kid. His behavior was better than any of the other ones, as far as that were at this facility by the finals can tell. He was really motivated to get out of there, and he was going to do everything to get out as fast as possible, and told me so, and I could tell based on everything I found out when I came to consult on the case. And Andy hadn't seen his dad for way over a year, since before he even got to the facility. His dad hadn't gone back to visit him. And then he went up at the facility. And then he had been another year. So he hadn't seen his dad in over 2 years. But Dad was finally going to come to visit. This was before I got involved in this case. It's just some information I found out after. After the dad called me in for a consult. But the way that it worked was that he was scheduled to be discharged fairly soon, and the dad decided that he would come pay him a visit, and the dad was going to take him out, since he had earned all his privileges. The dad was going to take him out for a big weekend, and they were going to go out and have lots of fun. The dad was going to take him to nice places and all that. And he was really looking forward to his dad visit for weeks and weeks. And that's, from what I heard, that's what he kept talking about. Hey, my dad's coming to visit. My dad's coming to visit. Well, on the day that his dad was coming to get him and pick him up, this is what happened. Andy wound up in locked seclusion for physical aggression against others. And how did this happen?